Hi everyone, welcome back to the Polar Bears International's Tundra Connections program. If we had you there for just a second and lost you, it is really windy here today. So we are right on the shores of the Hudson Bay, and we have a bear right outside. There's actually several bears right outside. You can see the one right here. So just kind of chilling out. We are really excited to have you for this special webcast because the focus of this webcast is all about you. Your questions, the questions that you have and that you want to submit to us. So it's going to be a really informal, fast-paced, ask your questions. We have 3 expert scientists here to help answer them. We have a bear outside, we have wind outside. It is a perfect day for you to join us and get your questions answered. So how do you do that? You can submit your questions right in the chat window. You can email them to us at questions@pbears.org, or you can actually send them to us via Twitter with the hashtag Tundra Connections. So without further ado, because we have a bear outside and all sorts of action here, and we want to get to as many of your questions as possible, let's introduce our expert panelist, and then we will dive in. So why don't we start with Dr. Nick?
Oh, hello everyone. My name is Dr. Nick Pilfold. I'm a polar bear scientist researcher. I also research seals, and currently I live in Edmonton, Canada.
Excellent. Dr. Megan?
My name is Dr. Megan Owen, and I'm a wildlife biologist at the San Diego Zoo's Institute for Conservation Research. And I study bears of all species, but my favorite by far to study is the polar bear. And I'm really excited to be here and talk with you all about your questions about polar bears.
Fantastic. And Dr. Kyle?
Hi, my name is Dr. Kyle Armour. I'm a professor at the University of Washington in Seattle, and I study Earth's climate and climate change, and I focus on sea ice and the role of sea ice in the climate system.
Fantastic. So we have a lot of questions that have been coming in. We have some that we already have in, so submit your questions. Chat window, email, Twitter. Let's get to it. We actually had a couple video questions come in too, so I thought we would start with a video question to kick things off.
We need a minute.
All right, so that's all right. Why don't we go, we'll get to the video question in just a second, queuing that up. Why don't we go to, where do polar bears live, Dr. Kyle? So that's like the first question, where are we, where do they live?
Right, so we're up in the Arctic tundra right now, just off of Hudson Bay in Churchill. There are polar bears here, and there are also polar bears throughout the Arctic. And they generally live on sea ice for most of their lives. Something like 90% of their time is spent on sea ice. The bears here are kind of unique. They come off the sea ice when it goes away in the summertime, and now they're on the land, like the ones we could see out in front of us.
Okay, related question to that, I think you maybe touched upon it, but from Suzanne, why do polar bears only live in the far north and not the far south? We actually just had a webcast this morning, I think, that kind of touched upon that. Any of you want to address that?
Sure. So we know that polar bears evolved from a brown bear ancestor, and there's actually only one bear species in the southern hemisphere, and that's the Andean bear. The northern hemisphere is much richer with bear species. So the polar bear evolved from a brown bear, and they've adapted to life on the sea ice. So they need the sea ice and the ocean beneath that sea ice to make a living out there, because they hunt ring seals and bearded seals primarily, and they need the fat from those seals to make a living in the Arctic. And it's that sea ice that makes them able to do that. In Antarctica, the Antarctic continent doesn't afford them that same opportunity. So they would have evolved in a very different way had they evolved in Antarctica.
Okay, another question that just came in from Robin Thiessen's class in Canada. What's the average lifespan of a polar bear?
I can take that one. So in the wild, the average lifespan is 15 to 20 years.
15 to 20 years. Very good. This is a good one. Miss Patton's class. How far can a polar bear see?
Oof. That's a great
Do
question.
they have good eyesight? I mean, do they have good eyesight? Do we know a lot about that?
You know, actually, we don't know very much about their eyesight. We're starting to better understand their sensory capacity, and by far their best sense is their sense of smell, and they use that sense of smell to find their prey and also to find other polar bears. We know polar bears, of course, are generally solitary, but when it comes to be the breeding season, they need to find a mate over hundreds or thousands of miles of sea ice, and so they use that sense of smell to track after a potential mate, and so it's really keenly tuned to their environment and to what they need to do to survive.
Okay. There was a question too. What exactly is that bear doing right now? So somebody, Dr. Nick, maybe you want to address
Sure,
what is?
Yeah, so we have a bear outside here. We're on the coast of Churchill, just chilling out, basically waiting for the sea ice to refreeze, reform, so it can get back out, start hunting seals. So the reason the big yawn there from that bear, just trying to be as relaxed as possible and minimize the amount of energy expenditure so that when he gets back out there on the sea ice, he can take advantage of those seals.
Fantastic. So I think we're ready to queue up a video question. So thank you for submitting those questions. And again, put them in the chat window, email them to us. Let's take a video question as our bear here stands up. He smelled something, or she smelled something. All right, video question.
Hi, my name is Carla, and my question is, what are baby polar bears called?
That's a great
Hi,
question. So a
my
baby
name is
polar bear
Carla.
is called a cub. And cubs are cubs for about 2.5 years. They spend that much time with their moms, and during that period they learn everything they need to learn from their moms to survive on their own out there on the sea ice.
Okay, related question to that too, and thank you for that video question. Speaking of babies, how many cubs can a female polar bear have?
So a polar bear is litter size. So we call when an animal has a number of babies, we call that a litter. So the average litter size for bears here on the Hudson Bay is about 2 cubs, but we know polar bears can have between 1 and 3 offspring when they give birth. And we also know that the number of cubs that they have is loosely correlated with their body condition. And so a healthy bear that's been able to get enough seals and is in a healthy Arctic ecosystem might be inclined to have more cubs than one that's in poorer body condition without as many fat reserves to raise those cubs with.
Okay. Why don't we try another video question? I think this one is from Dylan. So if we can queue up Dylan's question. I think there's Dylan's question right here.
At what age can the babies catch their own food?
That's a great question, Dylan. So polar bears, like Megan said, they spend a lot of time with their moms really early on. So 2.5 years, that first 2.5 years, they're learning everything they can from their mothers, and they're really, during that period, just imitating what their mom does. So especially very early on, if the mom's on a hunt, they're following close behind. If she's at a still hunt at a breathing hole, they're going to lie down and watch their mother. When they get to about 2 years of age, they start to become a little bit more independent. So they'll start going off on their own a little bit and trying it out and just practicing. But for the most part, for that entire time they're with their mothers, they're dependent on their mother's hunting ability in order to access food. It's once the mother weans them off and they start to go off on their own as a subadult that they really start to learn the tough ways of hunting seals on the Arctic sea ice for themselves.
And they ask, a couple of folks have asked, have we seen any cubs? And do you have any here now? And if not, do you have any pictures of what cubs look like? So I think we can answer
Sure,
all of those. Have we seen any?
We have seen
lot
a
of
number
cubs.
of family groups, some nice looking cubs. We had a mother and cub just off the buggy here about an hour ago, and it was just super fun to watch the mom and cub walk around and explore the environment.
Fantastic. So to try one more video question for now. This one is a question about bears in the Arctic, I believe. So yeah, let's roll that one.
Hi, my name is Kaneja, and my question is, are polar bears the only bears that live in the Arctic?
All right, that's a great question. Turns out polar bears are not the only bear in the Arctic. Grizzly bears, otherwise known as brown bears, also have a range all the way up to through the Arctic Circle in northern Canada and Alaska. And sometimes they interact with polar bears in interesting ways.
All right. And we actually, tomorrow, we have a special webcast cracking the curious case of the growler bear.
Yeah.
So we're going to be talking a lot more about that. So it's a perfect question. You all have to join us tomorrow to get some more details. This one it came in a lot. What are some of the special adaptations of polar bears? So I know we have some things here. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Nick while I get a few more questions here. You're going to talk about
Absolutely.
adaptations?
So for polar bears, the adaptations really are relying on the sea ice to hunt seals. That's the primary name of the game for polar bears. And certainly they have a lot of adaptations for that. This morning I talked about how their claws can stick to the sea ice and they use that to hunt seals. But right now I want to talk about their skull. We have a skull here to show you. And their skull is really developed for hunting seals. They have big, sharp canine teeth, very sharp molars in the back that can shear tissue. And so what happens is when they're out on the sea ice, they really want to get these canines sunk deep into a seal so they can hold on to it. Now, we all eat our food with our knives and forks in our hands, but polar bears are really face first into their food, so they want to be able to get in there and pinch and hold on. And what they're really looking to do, I'm going to borrow Kyle here for a second. He's my seal guy. He's going to be the representative seal here. What they're really trying to do is, if Kyle just leans forward, they're actually trying to bite the back of the neck and the back of the skull of a seal, because that's where the weakest point is on a seal, and they're really trying to clamp down as hard as they can and get that kill really quick.
Excellent.
That's some of the adaptations they have.
All right, so fantastic. One of the questions that just came in said, is it cold out there, and can you guys go outside? So the answer to both of those is yes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go out. We have a deck, and we're pretty high off the ground because the bears can come up to the buggies, and they're pretty tall. So we have a high deck so that we're safe. But I'll go out in the back. What I'll do is I'll take a picture real quick, and then I'll come back in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to turn over the live questions to you, Dr. Kyle. All right. So pick a couple of the ones, and I'll be right back.
All right. Great. Live question looks great. Carson asks, why do polar bears fight?
Why do polar bears fight? Oh, that's a really good question.
That's a wonderful question. I'd love to. Okay, yeah. So why do polar bears fight? So it's actually a great question to ask here on the Hudson Bay, because this is one of the largest congregations, or the highest grouping of polar bears you'll see anywhere in the world. And so we'll see groups, especially of young male polar bears, and they're sparring away, they're duking it out. But the one thing you won't see while they're fighting is any blood. So this is all fighting that's sort of play fighting, and they do this to sort of test each other's strengths, also to show off their own strengths, and to develop those really important fighting skills, because during the breeding season, there might be a real fight if both males are trying to breed with the same female. So it's all about testing your limits and learning new behaviors.
Great, thanks. Another great question. How long can polar bears swim in the ocean? Maybe.
Oh yeah, so we've been observing some more long distance swims recently, especially in the Beaufort Sea, which is near Alaska. So one of the longest swims we observed was recorded over a 9-day period, and the bear covered a large distance in that period in time.
Great. Fantastic. Oh.
How'd you guys do?
Great.
Yeah. We're working on.
So I'll send this out here in a second, but there we go. The bear right out back, and it's a little bit chilly. I don't know, BJ, can they zoom in and see my phone maybe? Wonder if that's possible. I had Dr. Elisa help me out, so I'll tweak this out, but that was right on the back deck. All right, and there is a bear right over my thumb. A ways away, actually, but I'll send that out. Follow the hashtag Tundra Connections. You can send your questions in there, and you can check out our live tweets. So
we just learned about why polar bears fight, and also for how long they can swim in the ocean.
Oh man, I missed that, huh?
I know, you did.
All right, so how about... Oh, did you guys talk about, we talked to I said earlier, can they see in the dark? Can they see in the dark? Can they hunt in the dark?
Again, that's a really wonderful question, and actually one that we're trying to develop a scientific study to better understand, because polar bears, of course, are in the dark during the wintertime for quite a number of hours, or in the high Arctic, almost the entire day. So because they have such finely tuned sense of smell, and they have good hearing, we know, they might more heavily rely on those senses to hunt. But it's a fabulous question. And one of the things I love about that question is that it reminds us that science is something that is very dynamic. We have so many things we still don't know. And we're counting on you guys to become scientists to help us learn these things in the future.
Fantastic. I think we have one more video question that came in. While we pull that one up, I want to encourage everybody. We have, more time here. Fire those questions in, chat window, send us the email, or you can post them to the hashtag Tundra Connection. So let's take one more video question, and then we'll get to a bunch more. So here we go.
Hi, I am Brady from Mrs. B's 4th grade class in Clarion, PA. We want to know if polar bears could change their diet and live in a different habitat.
All right, so for this one, who wants to take it? So can they live in a different climate?
Oh.
Megan, you want to take that one?
That's a really interesting question. I think, there are times of the year where it can be fairly warm up here, and polar bears deal with that by hunkering down and trying not to overheat. So they're kind of flexible in some ways, but it's always important to remember that what the seal or what the polar bears need up here is access to those very fat ice seals. And so they need the sea ice, and that is something that's really unique in the northern hemisphere to the Arctic. So polar bears need the Arctic. So without the Arctic, there are no polar bears.
Excellent. Next question, Dr. Kyle. How many polar bears are there?
Right, I think it's thought that there's 20,000 to 25,000 polar bears in the wild throughout the Arctic.
Okay, fantastic. What do, and maybe we touched upon it a little earlier with the adaptations, but specifically what do polar bears eat? And there's some follow-up questions. So, Dr. Nick?
Sure. Yeah, specifically polar bears eat a lot of different things. They'll eat anything they get their paws on, but they rely on those seals. And so across the Arctic, the main prey source we see are ring seals.
Okay. And is it possible for them to live off of anything else? Berries was a question that came in.
Okay. So terrestrial supplies, no, it's not possible for polar bears to live off of terrestrial food. What we see is when you see these bears out here on the coast right now, on average, they're losing about 1 kilogram of weight per day. Now those bears would love not to lose that weight, so they would love to go and try to put on as much mass as they can, but the berries and the kelp and the foods that are here really don't allow for that mass to be gained, and they really need to do that out on the sea ice when they get the marine mammal prey.
Okay, and how about, I'll keep with you for a second, Dr.
Sure.
Nick, polar bears' place in the food chain up here?
So polar bears are the apex predator of the Arctic. So if you think about the food chain, they sit at the very top of that food chain. The Arctic has a fairly simple and short food web. It starts out with algae at the bottom of the sea ice. That feeds zooplankton and fish. Fish feed the seals, and seals in turn feed the polar bears. So it's actually a fairly short chain relative to other systems on our planet.
Okay. Polar bear's lifespan, I think we touched upon it earlier, but since it came in again, Megan, can you just reinforce?
Sure. In the wild, a polar bear is lucky to reach 20 years old. So 15 to 20 years is pretty much the limit for wild polar bears, though occasionally we will find polar bears that are older than that. And in a zoo, a polar bear can live quite a bit longer, but that has a lot to do with a reliable food source and veterinary care and sort of the retirement package that zoo bears get.
All right. Do we still have that bear out there, BJ? We jump out and see it? I think our bear has walked away because it is quite cold, but let's take a few more questions here. Continue to put them in the chat window. Hibernation. Do polar bears hibernate? Who wants to take that?
I can take that one.
All
So
right.
polar bears are kind of unique relative to other bear species in the fact they don't hibernate. They're not a true hibernator like we see with other species of bear. So what happens is most of the bears, polar bears, do not actually even go into dens. So we think about black bears and brown bears going into dens in the winter. Only the adult females that are pregnant go into dens, and even in that state, they don't actually get into a complete hibernation. So it's kind of interesting in that sense that polar bears don't actually hibernate.
Okay. And I think this is an interesting question because they saw the video out earlier. BJ, can we go out and just see the tundra right now, possible?
And the bear is back.
Oh, and the bear is
bear's
back. So perfect timing for this question. They said, what exactly is that the vegetation, basically, that the bear is hiding behind, and it doesn't really look like it protects it all that much? Can anybody just talk
Sure.
about the tundra landscape here?
Sure. I mean, so that's actually pretty typical of this area of the Hudson Bay. Those are willow shrubs, and so during the summertime, if you come up here, those willow are all leafed out, and they'll be on a really nice tundra carpet with tundra plants that are laying on the ground. So right now, though, you take what you can get. So this bear is laying in that willow, that little pile of willows, and it's probably a little bit soft for a polar bear and giving it some protection from the wind.
Fantastic. And thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Bear, for coming back. All right. We have time for a few more questions. So this one, Mrs. Fletcher's kindergarten class wants to know, what is causing the sea ice to melt? Very good question. Our sea ice expert here.
Certainly. What's causing the sea ice to melt right now is global warming. And in particular, global warming is driven by increasing greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. And that traps the heat that's trying to escape and warms up both poles. So that's driving sea ice to reduce its extent, causing the bears to come off of it a little bit earlier and go onto it a little bit later than they'd like to. And also causing that sea ice to become thinner as it melts.
Okay. Well, related to that then, and I know we'll drive home the point again, but it's a kindergarten class. We have elementary age students, middle school students, some high school students, and some parents watching. So that's happening. But what can Mrs. Fletcher's kindergarten class do to help? Anybody want to take that one?
I'll take that one.
Yeah.
I think the easiest thing you can do as kids to help is to put down your electronics and go outside and play. Because all of our use of energy is contributing to the greenhouse gases that are resulting in a warmer climate. But playing outside, having fun, moving your body, these are all things that are good for you and good for the planet.
Fantastic. And I did have, so from Dunwood Elementary, grade 4, they said, hey, we'd like to send a video question in. So you can send that the same way. Just take your phone, send it to us via email or probably the hashtag Tundra Connections. If we don't get to it here in the next couple minutes, we'll try and respond to it later. We'll do another video. We'll do a video answer back to you. So thank you for asking, and thank you, Dunwood Elementary, for joining us as well. Let's see. Ooh, good one here. Miss Simpson's class, first grade class, would like to know, how do the polar bears run on top of the ice without sinking? Maybe we touched upon it, but let's go into it a little deeper.
Sure. Yeah, I can try taking that one. So polar bears, again, we were talking about claws earlier, so they have to stay on the sea ice in order for them not to fall into the water and sink. So their claws are very important for that. That allows them to have a tactile contact with the surface. And they also need the ice to be thick enough. So one of the things that's happening right now out in the Hudson Bay is we do have ice out there, but it's very thin. It's what we call grease ice. It almost just exists just on the surface as this tiny skin. It's not nearly thick enough for polar bears to sport the weight of a polar bear. That the sea ice needs to thicken up to maybe 10, 20 centimeters, something like that, before bears can actually walk out there and test it.
Okay. All right. Great. All right. We have time for a few more questions, so keep them coming in. And man, you guys are doing a great job. Let's see. Norwich Public Schools, 3rd grade. Do polar bears shed? Yeah. So let's take that one first. They have 2 questions. Do polar bears shed?
You know that one?
Sure, that's a really, really good question. So we do know that there is some shedding of fur, and it's seasonal, but again, it's one of these questions that we really don't have a good answer for in terms of how long and how uniform it is over the entire fur coat of a polar bear.
All right, and while there's perfect timing too, our polar bears showing off a little bit for all the students. So you guys, what a neat treat! And you can see in the kind of background there, one of the tundra buggies is kind of pulling around to the lodge. So what a special treat that we've had this bear here with us the whole time. Are seals or polar bears in danger of extinction?
That's a really good question. That's a question I often get when I have public talks and from school kids. The true answer to whether they're going to go extinct or not really depends on our own actions. If we can cap carbon emissions and get a handle on climate change, then we can secure the future for both polar bears and seals. But if we can't, then the future does look quite bleak in terms of their survival on this planet.
Okay. And I'm going to send you guys give you the email and stuff in just a second, but I thought this was a really good question. Elijah, wherever you're at out there, can polar bears jump? I've never thought about that, but do they actually?
That's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah, I think they're quite nimble, actually. Polar bears are very athletic animals, and when they want something, they can move fast and they can move with great power and agility. So I've seen polar bears trying to jump up onto things when we were in various scenarios out here. So I'd say yes. I don't know if they're vertical, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, this polar bear doesn't look like it's about to jump anytime soon, but
Yeah.
Great question, Eliza. That was a fun one for us to think
super.
about. Quick update for everybody. In the chat window, you can send those questions, and we're going to just have time for 1 or 2 more. But if you want to send us questions, and some of you have been asking about those video questions, I think the best way to do that is take your video and send it to us at questions@pbears.org. And maybe we'll try and mix it into tomorrow or later in the week, one of the other webcasts. So if you get one of those great questions prepared, send it to us, questions@pbears.org, and we will try and mix it in. So thank you so much for joining us today and asking all these great questions. Let's touch upon this one. Do polar bears ever mate with grizzly bears?
Oh, that's a good one from our upcoming growler talk. We're going to talk a lot more about that coming up. But yes, polar bears and grizzly bears are actually very closely related. and they can successfully mate and have hybrid offsprings. It's rare, we don't see a lot of it, but it can occur.
Okay, all right. Miss Donahue, thank you. Springwater Environmental Sciences want to know why polar bears have hollow fur. Who wants to take that one?
You want to go for it?
No, why don't you go for it?
Dr. Nick.
Well, actually, we got a sample
Yeah.
of fur right here. So that's a really good question. Essentially, the fur is it's hollow and devoid of color, which allows them to match the landscape that's around them. So essentially, what this fur does is it kind of takes up the color of the surrounding environment and the sunlight. So you've seen some image there of the sun probably going down on a polar bear coat, and it's looking a little bit orange. In the middle of the day, that coat will look really white. So yeah, that's one of the main adaptations for polar bears in the Arctic.
All right, well, we are about out of time here, so if you have any extra questions, keep them rolling in that chat window. I think after the chat, a couple of the scientists are going to jump into that chat, maybe kind of help answer some of those questions for a few minutes. Again, you can send it via email, video questions if you have them, and you can also, if you're on Twitter, use the hashtag Tundra Connections, and we'll check out all three of those and see what your great questions are and try and respond to all of them. So thank you so much for joining us today. Want to just kind of leave on that final message and reinforce that, ultimately we're up here, not just observing the polar bears, but really broadcasting out to all of you, because the scientists said it earlier, you are the ones who ultimately can help save the polar bear and protect and save our sea ice. So through those really daily simple actions of you reducing your carbon footprint, and we know that many of you are already doing things like riding your bikes to school and coming up with great programs at your school, no idling zones. So keep that up, because the thousands upon thousands of students that are watching right now, if each of you and your families did one thing differently tomorrow, that adds up to a big impact. And ultimately the message today is, this is about your questions. This whole broadcast is about you and the impact that you can have. So thank you. Couple kind of closing things here. We have some great teacher and student resources on Polar Bears International's new iTunes U channel. So you can go to itunes.com/Polar Bears International and check that out. You also, if you go to the Tundra Connections page, there's a post-event survey. Fill that out. We want your feedback, and we are going to give away a polar bear adoption to one lucky winner who fills that out. So make sure that your teachers do that. So speaking to the students right now, make sure your teachers do that, and you can potentially adopt a polar bear that will remain up here, but you'll still adopt it, right? We're not going to send it to your class. So thank you so much to all the sponsors. Thank you to our wonderful panel. Really appreciate all the questions and you joining us today. Thank you so much, and we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.
Bye, everybody.